Fantastic. I think we are live, and I can see that we have got people from all around the world here. So welcome to this webinar on how to move to New Zealand, how to migrate to New Zealand. My name is Scott Mathieson, and I'm the co-founder of Working In. And we've been doing this for over 20 years now, helping people move to New Zealand. And it's our passion. And at the moment, a lot of people seem to be wanting to move here. Maybe COVID has created a whole new environment. So we've got 40 minutes here to keep things as succinct as possible and to give you as much information as you can possibly have in a short period of time so you can make a decision about your next move. I always say this on our webinars, but I do like to congratulate people for being here because immigration is a big step. It does take a long time and it is a lifelong move normally. So it's got to start somewhere, and just being here on this webinar will be your first step. Maybe some of you have already been to New Zealand and you want to return. Some of you might have relatives. Whatever your story is, being here will give you a huge amount of information to make the journey down here. So first things, I'll just introduce you to my panelists. We've got experts in this field, well over 50 years of combined experience on this panel, more so actually, and a lot of passion for helping people make the move. So I'll go over to the UK, Paul Goddard. He's been with us for over 10 years. Paul, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Paul. For those of you who don't know, I emigrated to New Zealand back in January 2003. It was a huge move, as Scott said, massively life-changing. My move was a bit different to a lot of people. I had a film crew fly over from the BBC with me, and I wouldn't advise that for anyone. but it was a great experience at the time. It opened a lot of doors for me. And I've done various things in New Zealand, worked in jobs, and I've ran my own business, and I've DJ'd on a radio station and done all sorts of things. And then, I don't know, about 15, 20 years ago, I found Working In and been with Scott and the team, on and off through that process ever since. So, yeah, welcome. You're in the right place.
Thanks, Paul. And Paul is a licensed immigration advisor. And our next panelist is Nazim Lazari, and she heads up our head of immigration services at Working In. Nazim.
Hi, everyone. As introduced, my name's Nassim. I'm a licensed immigration advisor. I originally studied law in Australia and made the move to New Zealand 12 years ago. I've been with Working In since a long time, over 10 years now. And during that time, I've helped literally thousands of people make the move, similar to the move that Paul made, but maybe without the teeth group. So I'm looking forward to talking to everyone about the visa process and what that entails at the moment.
Fantastic. Paul, if you could mute while you're talking,
yeah, I just did.
That would be helpful. Okay, so our next panelist is also a migrant. She's based in Auckland, been with us for many years. Jo Bradshaw, if you could introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody, or evening, I always do that. Yes, my name's Jo. I am an international recruitment specialist for healthcare, and I moved to New Zealand 20 years ago. I'm originally from Blackpool in Lancashire. And yeah, loving living in New Zealand and really understand that migrant process. I've been working in for about 15 years, so I'm very well placed to help you on your journey to New Zealand.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jo. Thank you, Jo. And the other panelist, the other Kiwi as well as myself, Hilary Bonham. Please, Hilary, introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today. And I am also an international recruitment manager here at Working In and work alongside Jo and the rest of the team. I've also been at Working In for quite a long time now, 2 different stints. And I guess the reason why I love working for the team that you see today and our wider team is, I guess, we're also passionate about helping people like you through their journey of moving to New Zealand. It's a really great country. I'm definitely proud to call it my home, and there's a lot on offer here in terms of great work opportunities and also lifestyle. So looking forward to talking to you further.
Thanks, Hilary. Yeah, brilliant. So just a summary of what we're going to cover off today. We will be talking a little bit about the immigration, the policies that it might have changed, how to get to New Zealand from a visa perspective, what's the employment environment right now, and then Joe and Hilary can tell you a little bit about that. In New Zealand, you need to get a job before a visa most of the time. So Paul will take you through a little bit about that. Also, ask questions. We'll answer as many as we possibly can. If we can't answer them all right now, we can answer them later. And at the end, we'll be giving you an offering of, what next. Really, the key thing here is if you're wanting to move to New Zealand, you really got to understand whether you're eligible or not. Not just on age, the age limit for residency is 55, but there's a whole lot of other factors: health, character, employability, family. And a lot of people do get caught out by this. And so the best thing that we recommend, if you're interested in taking the next step, is taking what we call a My Visa Path. It's an eligibility assessment, and it allows you to go, right, this is the snapshot of who I am. And yeah, I can migrate, or if I can't currently migrate, what do I need to do to get enough points? So that's the thing that we'll be covering off. I'm just going to quickly give you an update of where we are now. We're actually in lockdown. Delta came here a few weeks ago, and our government's always been very, very aggressive and proactive around lockdowns. So luckily the caseloads have dropped, and I think yesterday there was about 20 new cases in the community. And most of New Zealand's dropped from level 4, which is the highest level, down to level 2. I'm based in Auckland, we're based in Auckland, and we're still in level 4, and we probably will be for a couple of weeks. Look, we're all okay with that. We think that, New Zealand's had quite a good run without COVID. And one of the major ramifications of COVID from an employment perspective and an immigration perspective is a lot of people left New Zealand to go back to their home countries, and industry has really kicked on. And so we have a massive skills shortage here. Unemployment is actually below the level of it was pre-COVID. So I don't know the exact number, but I think it's 4.7%, which is very low. And so there are a lot of job opportunities here, which is fantastic for anyone who's going to move to New Zealand, because the job is critical. So this whole job critical thing is a theme that'll come around a lot. We call it the catch-22. Paul, maybe you want to sort of discuss the catch-22 scenario a little bit more. Before I ask you to talk, Paul, I just quickly want to introduce and welcome all the people that have come through from the Immigration Group. The Immigration Group is a company in the UK who we partner with. And we all sent you out an email from the Immigration Group to join this webinar. And I just want to welcome you along specifically as well. Anyway, Paul, the catch-22.
Yeah, I think the easiest way or the best way to explain the catch-22 is to give sort of a picture of what's happening in New Zealand at the moment with the border closures. So if you want to visualize it, there's the borders, and they're kind of closed / opening a little bit. And then there's a massive queue of people building on this side, and there's a massive queue of employers building on this side. And I don't think in 15 years of doing this I've ever seen those numbers as high as they are right now, because the borders have been closed for so long. And now we've got this green light of a staggered opening of the borders from January. And the catch-22 basically exists, and this is the some people call it the catch-22, some people call it the chicken and egg. But let's really simply explain it. If I'm an employer in New Zealand and I get your CV, so you send me your CV because I've advertised a job and you're skilled and you meet, great, fantastic. I get your CV, I look at your CV, and I'll say, you know what, this person looks great. If they were in New Zealand right now and they had a visa, I'd interview them. I'd more than likely offer them a job. But they're not in New Zealand right now. And as an employer, I don't know if they're going to get to New Zealand. I don't know when they're going to get to New Zealand. I don't know how serious they are about moving to New Zealand. I don't know how long this is going to take. More importantly, I don't need what I need to do to help them get to New Zealand and what information I need to provide. I don't know about their family. I don't know if they're going to stay. There's this endless list of reasons not to engage with that CV. because the CV doesn't tell me what I need to know. It tells me you can do the job. It doesn't tell me that if I offer you the job, everything's going to be okay. That's really the catch-22. And the way around the catch-22 is you've got to remove those barriers for the employer. You've got to give the employer those answers. And if you can do that, that's one of the best secrets on how to get a job offer in New Zealand.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, and that is absolutely true. It's while there is a huge demand for skills at the moment, in this environment particularly because the borders have been closed for so long, most employers are not looking offshore because the perception is the borders are closed and you can't hire people from offshore anyway. That's not the case. We are bringing a lot of people in, so we'll get to that in a moment. So thanks, Paul. Maybe I can just ask Nazim a few questions now around the visa processes, because there's a temporary visa and then there's permanent residency. Most people who are coming here are looking for permanent residency. Is that the case, Nazim? And how does that work? And how do they get it?
Yeah, so I've seen a few comments asking about, coming to visit and all the rest of it. So holidays and trips aside, the normal way to come to New Zealand for work is initially on a temporary visa. So in New Zealand, almost all the visa policies that are available require a job offer in order to get that temporary visa. Now, most people will always start with that temporary visa, one, because it's quicker to obtain and it allows you to get here sooner and start working sooner. But also it has a lower sort of barrier or bar to entry. So if you can meet those criteria, you're well on the way to qualifying for residency down the line. So obviously, it's a beautiful country. It's a great place to live. I was smart enough to make the move and come here. I'm sure you also have the same desire. And so the longer term plan is then to have the ability to remain living and working here indefinitely. And so there's different residency pathways to do that. And again, almost all of those require you to have a job offer, a skilled employment in order to be invited to apply. So it's normally a two-step process. One, because the residency always takes a lot longer, and because there's additional requirements to be made. And when the job's been you've been made an offer of a job, the employer doesn't want to wait, months or years for you to come and take up that role. They need somebody now, and so that's why you'd start on a temporary visa first.
Yeah. Okay. So what you're saying is that in any situation where you're offered a job, the work visa or the temporary visa would be applied for and issued and granted. And then once people were here in New Zealand, or maybe when they were offshore, then they would apply for the residency process. And in normal times, how long would that would take? And these are not normal times.
They're not normal times. We used to lodge both concurrently with the idea that you were here within a couple of months of the job offer, and then maybe your residency took, 6 to 9 months. Unfortunately, it's taking a little bit longer than that now.
Yeah, up to a couple of years, isn't it? I mean, that's the reality. So there is a massive backlog in immigration in New Zealand, which is one of the reasons why we're saying, look, if you are serious about this, get going now, because the pressure on the system is enormous. And once the borders open, we're anticipating quite a rush, quite a surge of applications globally. And as Paul said, employers will be looking for people from around the world. So, the sooner that you start the process is the better. And there's never been a more important time to actually say that. So thanks, Nazim. In terms of the actual employment market, Hilary, you're talking to employers every day. I know that because I'm in the same office as Hilary. And we know that a lot of employers are looking offshore already and interviewing people offshore. So can you just give everybody an update of, what the market's like? What are employers thinking? What are the opportunities? A broad picture for our viewers. Hilary.
Sure. Thanks, Scott. I think, like some of the other panelists were saying earlier, there was a skill shortage in New Zealand prior to COVID, and now there's a backlog. So a lot of employers are still looking for the staff that are looking for, and then a backlog on top of that. So there's a real need for companies looking for skills But there is a bit of that catch-22 where some of them, and certainly a lot of my clients, are saying that they've been getting inundated with CVs, and they don't have the bandwidth to go through those CVs because they don't know where everybody's at. So they are saying they've got a skill shortage. And then obviously thinking that they can't get people into the country. But we're working with a number of large companies across New Zealand and going through that process with them. So we're bringing in skilled migrants for them. I've got clients that are recruiting, which is awesome, and they're getting border exemptions. And we've also got clients who are recruiting and pipelining when things ease. So as Paul was saying, in January next year, we're expecting things to ease a little bit further with the borders. So then we'll start to see companies go, and kind of there'll be that rush on that Scott was alluding to. So we're working really closely with companies that are kind of keen to work through our process. So they understand how we work at Working In with that eligibility process and taking people through that process, because it can take a long time. And what my job is, once you've done the eligibility process with Paul, is our recruitment team meet with you and get to know you a little bit more, find out what your drivers are, where your skills sit, and match you to an employer here in New Zealand. And the roles and the companies that we're currently working for are across the board. I've got a lot of companies currently across construction and trade. There's a real need there. The government has got a lot of projects going on at the moment. So we're seeing some really exciting things happening in the space, but just need to ensure that people have gone through the process to ensure that they're actually ready to move to New Zealand. They can get their visa, and then we match you with the companies.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Yeah, look, so there's, I mean, the picture is the same, as that there is demand, but it's almost too much demand, and employers don't have the bandwidth or the headspace or even the know-how of how to work with offshore people in this environment. One thing you did talk about was the border exemptions or no border exemptions. I'm going to just go, before I talk to you, Joe, I'd like to go back to Nazim. Can you just explain the border exemptions process and what's happening there? Why are some people not allowed in and others are? Nazim.
Sure. So Paul did his explanation about how the borders were closed, but it's kind of opening. Well, what we know is officially our borders are closed, but actually it's a bit like a sieve and things can get through. And so over the last 18 months, we've been applying for and getting border exemptions approved for people that we can fit into the criteria. So there's different potential ways that people can meet a border exemption. Normally it's related to the fact that you've already got relatives here or family and all the rest of it. But for those that are coming based on their skills, we've been able to get them in either through the critical health worker or other critical worker. Now, most people will fall into the other critical worker because if you're not health, then you're just everything else. And then as part of that process, it's a lot of work. Although we've had success, I do need to be clear that not everyone will automatically qualify. And it takes, in some cases, it takes months for us to get that application process underway and to get it to a point where we can submit an expression of interest. So the border exemption process at the moment is an additional step and is only available for certain people, depending on their role and who the employer in New Zealand is. But people are still coming and we're obviously getting them into the country.
I think all the more reason to do this eligibility assessment as well, because you may qualify or you may not. And I think that's important as well, depending on timing, right?
Absolutely.
So, Joe, you've been bringing in or assisting a lot of healthcare professionals come to work in hospitals throughout New Zealand. They obviously meet the border exemption process. Putting that aside for a moment, just for our viewers' sake, to take people through the process once they've done their My Visa Path eligibility assessment and they've talked to Paul, and then they're introduced to you from an employment perspective, because I just really want to make the point to the viewers that whilst we are an immigration specialist, we're also an employment specialist, and that's kind of what makes our service quite helpful for you, because they're both so linked. And so when Paul hands somebody over and introduces somebody to Joe, she goes down her path. And maybe you want to explain, Joe, how you do that and what happens.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thanks, Scott. That's right. I mean, our services are very integrated between immigration and employment, and those are the two key things that you need to be able to get to New Zealand. And so once you've done your eligibility assessment, then you'll come, if you're a healthcare specialist, just to talk through my process, but it's the same for the other recruitment teams as well, is that we do what we call a job consultation, basically. Now, what we go through in the job consultation is clarifying everything on your CV and clarifying your skills and your experience, but also delving into your motivations for moving and what's your family situation, where's your preferred location in New Zealand, what are you into, where are we best going to match you? And that's what it's about. It's about learning all about you, and then to be able to put you with the best employer that's going to basically ultimately give you the best opportunity. And so it's much more than recruitment. And whilst we're doing that, we're also supporting you and helping you on this whole journey. So what we're doing is getting you job ready. And as several of the panelists have referred to, is if you're just going to flick your CV to an employer, you're not job ready. What we do is we present you to an employer when we know that you can get a visa. We've checked out all your skills. If you need registration, for example, which healthcare professionals do, what is your time frame for moving? So that we can actually put this whole picture together, a profile of you, and we're presenting you to a decision maker, which makes a big difference than you just applying online where you go into a big pile of CVs. So what we're doing is we're cutting through that process essentially. And so we also may get some references as well to support your application. Once you've got an interview, we'll prep you for the interview. So we'll give you all the advice needed to get ready for that. And then following the interview, then we're constantly following up with the employer and moving that process forward to make sure that we can do things as timely and efficiently as possible. Once you've got your job, back over to visas. And then we're helping you through the rest of the journey to get you here as soon as possible.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So what I'm hearing you say is that by you representing somebody from offshore, you are getting in and talking to the decision maker, and that decision maker already knows who you are, who knows who we are, understands our process, understands that that person has been validated effectively, and you can put them on the same level in terms of the recruitment process as a local.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The only difference being the time frame may be a bit longer than a local, but we've done everything to get you ready, so that time frame will be shorter than if you were doing it yourself.
Sure. Okay. But look, timeframes have been here forever, ever since New Zealand's been hiring people from offshore, which was basically after World War II. We've had the skills shortage and a brain drain. So we're very aware of that. And look, Joe, again, I know that you've been visiting some of the people that have emigrated here. They are now living a new life. Maybe if you've got a couple of minutes, you can just briefly tell us one or two stories about people's experiences now that they've arrived in New Zealand. This is what it's all about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's right, Scott. So part of our process as well, it's not just about getting you the job and the visa. When you do arrive in New Zealand, we are continuing that relationship with you and see ourselves as a support person. And that's what we do. We're a team of a lot of migrants ourselves, so we do really understand that support is important. So I will physically go and visit some of my healthcare professionals that I've placed into jobs. And generally speaking, the feedback has just been incredible. You know, what my people are saying to me is that, you know, I fulfill their dream basically in coming to New Zealand, which is incredibly humbling and rewarding for me. And they're just loving the improved work-life balance. A comment from a candidate the other day is it's way more peaceful and calmer. They're finding that one person was a nurse, and she said it's just way less stressful and way less hours that they're working. And they're also being, you know, able to spend more time with their families and, you know, getting to the beach on the weekend and accessing all those wonderful things that New Zealand has to offer.
Yeah. Okay, that's really nice to hear. And that is true. And I think that's, I mean, Nazim started off by saying that she's an Australian and she moved here 12 years ago, and you know, obviously she likes it enough to stay, and that's coming from an Aussie. And Paul, 18 years here. Paul, maybe you can just run through some of the roadblocks that you face, or some of the questions. You know, what are the FAQs? You're talking to people every day. What are the things that? That's a big sigh, mate. Well, I know you've had a big day. I know you're busy at the moment, right? But you know, maybe there's some themes that are repeated that people want to know. Yeah. So what are the big blocks?
Definitely. I mean, the big block, and you can see it here in the chat room as well. It's all around jobs. How do I get that job in New Zealand? You know, because, you know, finding out that you're eligible for a visa and all those things, you know, you got to do all those things, but being eligible for a visa doesn't necessarily help, you know, make the move happen. The job is the key that unlocks everything, and that is the massive barrier. And, you know, one of the things I keep saying to people is we're in a very unique position as working in, because we weren't set up, as you know, Scott, you weren't set up 20 years ago, whenever it was, to do visas. You were set up to help New Zealand employers find skilled people from overseas. That's the core of the business. That's the heart of the business. And adding visas just was a very logical step, because, you know, we need to make sure that those employers get the people that they want and it runs quickly and smoothly. And then adding recruitment was the next logical step to that. And there really isn't anyone else, I think, in the industry that does what we do in the way that we do it. There's a few people who try, but they just don't have the networks and the connections. And I get lots of questions. I get a lot of the same questions. Where am I going to live? Which town should I be in? How do I get there? How long can I stay when I get there? Can the family come with me? You know, all these things. You've got to consider these things, because it's a life-changing move. And we can give you all the answers to those questions. Every one of those questions. I don't think there's a question that we can't answer. And if there is, we'll find the answer. You know, because we've had 15, 20 years of answering questions, you know, from people who want to move. And when we give you those answers, that's great. But the one piece of advice I can give everyone who's on here today is, at some point when we give you the answers, when we show you the way forward and we explain, if you do this, this, this and this in this way, that's how you're going to move to New Zealand, then you just have one simple thing to do to make this happen. You just have to make a decision. If you don't make a decision, you're going to stay where you are. If you make a decision, you'll move forward. Okay? And that's literally it. You can ask as many questions as you want about anything, and you can ask them endlessly. It's not going to move you forward. Moving forward is going, right, okay, these people know what they're doing. Let's do this. Let's move them forward, and let's do it that way. Of course, you need the answers first, and of course, we're going to give you the answers first. That's why we have consultations.
Look, and I think that consultation, which, you know, obviously people can do, is really helpful, Paul. And that is a first step, isn't it? And that's what you're inviting people on this, the people on this webinar. If you want to have just 10 minutes with Paul, then we are more than happy for you to have that consultation, no charge, because there are those questions. You know, what happens if my child's 17, about to turn 18? What happens, you know, about my aging parents? Can they come? You know, I'm turning 55 next year. Am I too late? So there's all these little questions that are very unique to you. Maybe you've had a drink driving conviction. Maybe you've got high blood pressure. Is that going to stop you? Potentially it can, but you've got time to rectify it. So Paul can answer all those questions. Do you have anything else to add to that, Paul?
No, I mean, that is absolutely the first step. Everyone who's on this webinar, I've put the link up there numerous times. I think we're going to email you the link. You can access my calendar. You can get a free 10-minute call with me. That's great. That will give you some clarity. We call it a clarity session. But if you want to actually then move forward, we can do a full assessment. That's a full visa assessment, a full recruitment assessment, a report, and a full consultation with me. That's what we call my visa pathway. That's ultimately the first big step in moving forward. It doesn't mean you're hopping on a plane tomorrow, even though if you want to. It doesn't mean you're hopping on a plane tomorrow. It means you're going to get all the information you need to move forward.
Yep, great. Okay, can I just remind the other panelists to mute when you're not on, because I can hear some typing, which is great because it means you're answering questions. But just remember that we can hear you tapping away. Nazim, you're going to be, or your team at least, will be doing the eligibility assessments, the My Visa Path. Maybe you can just describe to people that once they've spoken to Paul and they want to go ahead and really understand their situation, what are the sort of questions that we're going to be asking? So that we get a clear picture. And also, secondly, what can people do to start preparing now?
Yeah, so the kinds of things that we'll be asking include some of the stuff that Paul's brought up that you might have questions about. We really want to get into the detail of that. You know, children, family, anything that you might have done in your youth that might be following you around in terms of like a conviction or a charge or a caution, because all of this is really, really important for us to understand, because that affects the type of visa that you qualify for, and also what extra work may or may not need to be done up front to make sure that that visa can be issued, not just for a temporary visa, but also for residents. So we want all of the information as much as possible, because that allows us to check your situation against the immigration instructions and be able to say, yeah, you're good to go, or you're good to go subject to us sorting out a few extra things, or maybe this isn't for you. So by having that information, you can then, you've got the tools then to start the process. So when you do become a client, and if we have identified, particularly if there's a couple of things you need to work on, we then have the benefit of time to start preparing. So if you've got a health concern that we know that we can get a waiver for, putting the steps in place to start preparing, whether it's collecting documents, changing lifestyle, whatever it might be, to get to that endpoint. If it's related to your qualifications and if you need registration, making sure that we're helping you, maybe slightly pushing you along that process, because that can add time. And we know that you will need that as part of not only the visa process, but also the job. Because even if you've got the job offer, you can't, and you accept it, you can't start it until you've got that particular, next step in the process. So as Paul said, you need to start somewhere. And then once we know that we're starting with you, we can pinpoint what each of those steps and that timeline is, and we can make sure that we're on the right path and we're getting to where we need to be as quickly as we can.
And Nazim, I know that because of COVID, there's been some delays in getting documents from some people. So in terms of, hey, look, what can I do right now so that I'm not going to get too delayed? I'm really committed to coming to New Zealand. So nothing's going to stop me. What do I need to do, particularly around some of that documentation?
Yeah. So obviously we're inviting everyone to do that first free assessment online. You can then have a chat with Paul. We do your My Visa Path. You're good to go. You sign up, and we will then clearly identify what documents you need and in what format. So what's important to note is that some of the visa application process requires original documents. So if you need to get specific documents from a university or a previous employer or whatever it might be, we want to be working with you now so that you can work around any particular, I don't know what it's like. We know some countries are working on skeleton shifts. So documents that might have taken a couple of weeks to get is now taking several months. So the sooner you can start that process, the sooner you can get to the end goal, because it's not just about you wanting to move fast. You're now reliant on third parties as well, like schools or universities, previous employers, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that dovetails nicely onto registration, and for some occupations, registration is required. Joe, in your area, in the healthcare area, everyone requires registration, not just for their job, but for their visa. So what are you recommending that people do there who are in the healthcare industry?
Hi, yes, that's absolutely right. So there's different regulatory boards depending on what your profession is within health. So if you're a physio or in the medical field, or you're a nurse or a midwife, there's different boards. And so each different discipline needs to have their registration to be able to practice in New Zealand. And so for healthcare professionals, when we get to the point of applying for your visa, not only do you need the job, but you also need your registration in place as well. So my advice to anybody would be to get started on your registration. As Naseem was saying, in terms of getting documentation together, you can have the same problems when getting your documents ready for registration. So it might take 3 or 6 months to get your registration. So you really need to allow for that as well in that whole time frame for moving. So the number one thing I would say to people today is get started on that registration.
Fantastic. Yep, that's right. So and we can assist with that, right?
And absolutely, that's right. Yes, we advise lots of people every day on the best steps and sort of ongoing questions that they have when going through that process.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got 4 minutes to go. So everyone probably wants to get back to Netflix or their evening meal or whatever it may be. So we're just going to wrap up now. Paul, do you have any final remarks or any final recommendations for everybody who's viewing?
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I would say to people is don't hang around. If you're looking at moving in 6 months' time, 9 months' time, 18 months' time, even within sort of a 2-year window, it might seem a long way off. January next year might seem a long way off. It's not a long way off at all. That time is going to fly by. And one of the difficult things with moving is you've got to keep your life going as it is. You've got your jobs, you've got your life, you've got your family. You're busy already. Trying to create a life in another country whilst you're already living a life in where you are is extremely difficult, and life gets in the way. And what you have to do is commit and then do things in steps. And if you do things in steps and you've got other people helping you take you through those steps, you can carry on with your life whilst building a new life or steps to a new life going forward. So the key message is there: don't wait for borders to open, don't wait for any of that. You're going to be waiting a long time. There is not going to be a date in the sand where they say we're closed and we're open. It's a steady opening. It's already started. So don't be at the back of the big queue.
Too right. And the one thing that I've noticed in immigration over the years is that windows open and then they close, and so yeah, don't they? And so while the windows are open, then you go. Naseem, thanks, Paul. It's really good. It's a very clear advice there. Naseem, how many visas did we do last year? A couple of thousand. I see that there's people from all over the world here: South Africa, UK, even from within New Zealand, Singapore. We've got quite a diverse team. We've got someone who specialises in South Africa, Daryl. What else can we offer for people from around the world? What sort of languages have we got on board, for example?
We've got a big team of licensed advisors and staff. So we speak Mandarin, Cantonese, 3 or 4 different Hindi dialects, Indian dialects. I don't know what's the other one. Filipino dialects, Thai. I speak a little bit of Farsi, but not very well. Stick to English. So yeah, we're a big team. We have a lot of experience, and I think we looked that we've done. We're doing several thousand visas a year. We've been doing that for many, many years, and we're also dealing with literally thousands of employers. So the team has a lot of experience, and there's very few times where something pops up where we don't already think, oh, we've already dealt with that, we know how to sort that and smash it out, so it's going to be fine. So I think the great thing about working with the team that I do is that they're all great individuals who are really, really smart. We have one person that we love just because they can find little nuggets of policy that finds the answer and the way through for some of our tricky clients and their situations.
Thanks, Nazim. And a quick 30-second summary of what to do next and your final words, Hilary, please.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the main thing that I wanted to say as a final was just reiterating that there's still a skill shortage here. So there's some amazing opportunities here in the job market. We've been in market for 20 years, so we've got some amazing relationships with companies across New Zealand and across industry. We're going to be seeing, and we are starting to see, a boom in the construction and trades area, and there's a lot going on in the IT space, and we deal with teachers and other companies across the board. So time to start is now, and hopefully look to meeting you with our recruitment team.
I was actually going to say, Hilary, maybe you should show your computer out the window and look at the sea, but maybe that's a bit too much. Hilary's in lockdown and she's right down on the coast in one of the most beautiful parts of New Zealand, in Raglan. Lucky Hilary.
Yeah, it's been amazing, but it's actually a storm here today, so I won't show you what it looks like.
It's all good. Jo, quick final word before we go.
Yes. So I would say, look, get in the process. You know, it's all very well sitting doing research and more research and reading forums and private groups, but most people, when they come to us, they're actually quite confused. So get in the process, get the facts. We will give you all the right information and we'll simplify it for you so that you can actually start that journey. Critical health workers or health workers can move to New Zealand at the moment, and the border is open for you, and so as providing you meet the eligibility. So get started. You can come here, you can bring your family, just get going.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I mean, that's it from us. I hope that's been helpful. Whether you use us or not, I'm sure you've got a lot of information there, which is, what we do. We're more than happy to give that information away and make sure that whatever you're doing is going to be helpful. New Zealand's always welcomed skilled migrants. That hasn't changed. Probably, I'd say our employers are far more respectful of skilled migrants than they have been, because with a shortage of people now, they're really realising where the holes are in their businesses. So it's been quite an interesting dynamic. So look, thank you very much for joining us today. And I really hope that you got some value out of this. And if you want to speak to Paul, just get in, jump on, grab 10 minutes on his calendar and take it from there. So Once again, thanks very much. And we hope to see you in New Zealand. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.